with this, there are some concerns that people have about vaccines. Are they going to work for you? Are they safe, or other things? And so because of this, in this talk, we've asked people to send in questions. And so what I'd like to do is there's a list of questions here. I'm going to go through some of the questions here, and as you have questions, you can send those in as well. The first question I'm going to get here is it safe? Okay. Is the influenza vaccine safe? It is safe. In fact, it's given to people as young as 6-month-old babies all the way until 100 years old, or even longer than that. So it is safe. It's given in millions of doses every year, and very few side effects. And the side effects can sometimes be some aching at the site of the injection, but it is a very safe vaccine. Let's look at the next question here. Next question. Let's see. Well, someone asked, is it effective? Is the vaccine effective? As I mentioned before, it's not 100% effective, but it is much better than not having a vaccine. So it's about 65% effective in preventing it in the general population. However, there are some interesting statistics regarding the efficacy. There aren't good statistics for Thailand, but there are some good statistics for the US. So for example, for the year 2018 in the US, the influenza vaccine prevented 6 million cases of influenza. Of those, it prevented 3 million doctor's visits, and it prevented 91,000 hospitalizations and 5,700 deaths. All of that was prevented in the year 2018 just for the United States. Throughout the world, the numbers are even larger. This means that, yes, the vaccine is very effective. By the way, during that period of time, none of the people who ever got the vaccine had any serious illnesses. No one died from it, even though 500 to 600,000 people die every year from the flu virus. How about the next one? Oh, this is a really good question. Someone asked, is it expensive? The price of the influenza vaccine is cheaper than the price of the medicine that we use to treat influenza. So that tells me, yes, it's worth it. It's worthwhile. And you can definitely either check our website or call and we can tell you the price, but definitely it is cheaper than treating influenza. Next question here. Is it painful? Well, all injections are a little bit of a poke in the arm, but we have some really good nurses. I have my influenza vaccine every year. As a doctor, it's a good idea. In fact, I'll talk in just a minute. That reminds me about who should get the influenza vaccine, but I can tell you it feels like a little poke, and sometimes afterward it may get a little bit of aching in the muscle, but it's really not that bad. Now, I mentioned just now that we especially recommend the influenza vaccine in certain groups of people. One group is people under age 2 years old, and then the other group is people older than age 60, because those two groups are the highest risk of having complications. But other risk factors for complications include people with immune system problems such as HIV, diabetes, people with lung problems such as cancer of the lungs, asthma, emphysema, definitely should have it. People with heart problems should definitely get the vaccine. If you have a history of heart disease, you have hypertension, you have any problems with your heart, definitely you need the vaccine. People who are around crowded groups of people should get the vaccine. So if you work as a teacher, or you work in a public area, you work in a shopping mall, or you have to ride the bus every day to go to work where you're around lots of people, you definitely need the vaccine. School children, all school children need the vaccine, because one of the first places that influenza spreads every year is in the schools. If you have any medicine that you're taking that suppresses the immune system, you should get the vaccine as well. And for those in general, during years when the influenza outbreak is really bad, it's definitely a good idea. The vaccine prevents against influenza. If you get influenza infection, that influenza increases your risk of getting other problems. I mentioned this before about bronchitis and pneumonia. But if you're around a group of people who have COVID-19 and you have influenza, you're much more likely to get an influenza infection, or rather a COVID-19 infection. Because of that, the influenza vaccine prevents influenza, which is a way of reducing your risk of getting an infection with COVID-19. It doesn't protect you at all against COVID-19, but it protects you against influenza, which can increase your risk of getting a COVID-19 infection. So it's definitely worthwhile, especially in these days where there is an outbreak of COVID-19 worldwide. Next question here. Does it cause fever, or does the vaccine cause fever? In some people, it's usually about 5% of people who get the influenza vaccine. They may have a slight fever. Now, I've had people ask me, does this mean that when they got the injection that it gave them influenza? No. How the vaccine works is it stimulates your immune system to fight against influenza. And that stimulation of the immune system can sometimes result in some fever. So if you get a shot of the influenza vaccine and you get a fever, does that mean you're sick? No, it doesn't mean you're sick. It means it's stimulating the immune system. Can you go to work on those days when you have that low-grade fever? Yes, you can. You don't have any infection. How do I know this? Because the influenza vaccine is not made from a live virus. Because of that, it's impossible for you to get influenza from the vaccine. If you do get a little bit of low-grade fever, that's because your immune system has been stimulated by the vaccine. It's not because you've gotten sick from the vaccine. Oh, actually the next question just answers that, or asks the same thing. Does the vaccine cause influenza? No, it can't cause influenza because the vaccine is not made from a live virus. So it's not possible for the vaccine to cause influenza. Next question here. This is a good question. Can it be given to pregnant women? Pregnant women are one of the high-risk groups. I forgot to mention before, but one of the highest risk groups. During the pandemic influenza of 2009, the swine flu or the H1N1 influenza, one of the biggest groups of people that had problems with infections and dying was pregnant women. So what about the vaccine? Can you give it to a pregnant woman? Yes, you can. Influenza vaccine can safely be given to pregnant women, and it's a good idea, especially if a woman is pregnant during the flu season, to come in and get the vaccine. Can I still get the flu after getting vaccination? Yes, it's possible. The vaccine protects against about 65% of the time against influenza. But if you do get influenza after you've had the vaccine, you're much less likely to get complications of influenza, much less likely to die from influenza. So you're much less likely to get pneumonia, bronchitis, ear infections, sinus infections, or have a dangerous complication from influenza. So the vaccine is still worthwhile even if you get influenza afterward. Also, the length of time is much shorter. And I think we've got time. One more question. How effective is the vaccine? As I mentioned before, about 65% of the time it can prevent it. However, with influenza, as I mentioned before, just in the US, 6 million people were prevented from getting the infection by giving the vaccine. And so because of that, worldwide, millions and millions of people don't get influenza and don't get sick and don't die because of having the vaccine. 600,000 people every year die from it, and that's a preventable death. So I hope You've learned something today, and if you do have questions, send them on in and we'll try to answer them as they come. Thank you very much.